Alright painters, before we begin the tutorial on this piece, I want to make sure that you have checked out the video about creating color mixes for the skin. If you haven't, watch that first, create your mixes before we start on this tutorial. Welcome to my free portrait painting tutorial. First, pre-wet your paper using a brush with some clean water. Make sure it's glistening and remains glistening. Avoid having pools of water. I'm using Coldpressed paper in the journal here. I'm also using animal hair brush. This is made of goat's hair because I want really free flow, kind of expressive brush strokes for this exercise. So if you want the look of that kind of loose look, you should try out the animal hair brushes. For the base skin tone mixture, you'll need brown, red, orange, yellow, and light blue, but mostly brown. Along the way, we'll be using purple, blue, dark green, and light green to tweak our mixes to become warmer or cooler. Once you create your mixture, take some out and then dilute it with some water. We're going to use this as the first layer for our skin. Make sure it's really diluted, light tea consistency. At this stage, you don't need to be super precise. Just loosely color in from the forehead downwards, and make sure you try to avoid the eyes, because you want to make sure the eye area remains white, the white part of the eye. When you pick up your paint, just see how far you get with the pigment already in your brush before you pick more pigment. That way you are not going to be overwhelmed with too much pigment too early on. And then if you decide you need a little bit more, you can pick up some pigment. And then just, again, make sure you spread it around and see how far that gets. So a very gradual process of creating your layer. Once you're done with your base layer, you can dry the page using a heat gun or a hairdryer. You want to dry your page until it's bone dry before you lay the next layer. So here we go with our second layer. I'm still using the same mixture that I used for the base. I'm going in with the pigment loaded brush here straight onto the dry paper. This is the wet on dry. The reason I'm doing this is because I'm using a very diluted mixture, and I want to see how it looks with this second layer before I blend the edges. If I pre-wet the paper again, it will be too insignificant, this second layer. So here I am exercising water control. I'm just blending the edges so the middle area remains intact, and then the edges are kind of softly blended. For the forehead, I pre-wetted that top right section, and then I went in with the pigmented brush and the cheek area where you have that fold on the cheek because she's pressing on her cheek there. I covered that dark area first. The way I approach painting faces is trying to get the shape of the face, like the shape of the placement of the cheek and the smile lines, and the way the eyes are positioned on the face, trying to capture the landscape of the face, if that makes sense. I put the darker shades down in those areas first before I build on anything else. Again, wet on dry, straight onto the lips, and blend it. Next, I'm pre-wetting the brow or eye socket area down to the side of the nose because that's the next area that looks like it's got a bit of darker shade. I started from the corner of the eye and then gently pull the brush along the side of the nose around the nostrils. And I've extended it down to the top of the mouth before blending. I will now paint the eyebrows. You want to make sure that the eyebrow still has like skin tone underneath because you'll be layering it later with darker color of the hair. Then the corner of the eyes, wet on dry and then blend. Same deal with the other side of the forehead. I'm just pre-wetting that area because I want the pigment to travel kind of far and kind of softly disappearing into the hair. I made sure the dark area that defines the edge of the face is layered. At the moment, this is just a second layer, so I will be building up on that. There's a slight squish landscape on the chin here, so I just want to put very light shading there. Because the chin needs to be soft, I pre-wetted the area, put the pigment down, and then do a bit more blending. Next is to do the nose. Nose is a bit tricky. For the nose area, there's a couple of combinations of shades and blends. There's like a soft area up the bridge, and then it kind of becomes a bit more defined towards the nostril, but not as defined as the other side. So make sure the area is pre-wet so the pigment can kind of travel and move around a bit. Here I extended the pre-wetted area to the cheek just to make sure that I have the paper ready if I need to blend in that direction. You always refer back to your reference image just to see what other areas that could use a little bit of additional pigment. When you're doing portraits, you work in sections. So right now I'm working on the other side, upper eyelid. While I'm up this area, I'm going to tackle the hair. The hair, if you look at the reference image, has got a bit of green tinge to it, which is very common for hair color, believe it or not. So I'm just pre-wetting those areas around the face that will define where the hair starts. Here is a mixture of greenish look, which is light green with a little bit of the skin brown. Just loosely color the area around the hair, making sure that you pay attention to the jaw line because we want that area to really frame the face. Then we go over the top of the head, down the side. If you look at the reference image, this area is quite well defined and dark. So we want clean, crisp edge right here. When you're painting hair, imagine the hair in chunks. Don't try to tackle them strand by strand in first go. Here I added a bit of green in the really dark little triangle there around the pinky. You will also notice there's a bit of a greenish shade on the palm area. Skin color is very nuanced. There's a lot of like gentle shifts of tones. Green is very common to be painted on the skin, as well as blue and purple. So here I go, just blending in that green. I'm just gonna go in there and check if the face is dry. Pre-wetted the brow area and I dabbed a little bit because I put too much water down. I'm laying down the green there as an underpainting for the eyebrows. Pre-wetting the other side of the eyebrow and putting the green down just at the tip and then pushing the pigment towards the center of the face. Next, I pick up a little bit of that green mixture and color in the eye. Because I only painted the eyebrows and eyes in this section, I'm just going to use my handheld fan to dry up those areas. While I'm drying this, I had the idea, because it's winter time in Melbourne, the paper takes quite a while to dry, so I just kept the fan running while I painted the area on the side of the forehead with a mixture of purple to the brown. So I just added a bit of purple in there to this is called the underpainting, where I put darker shades and give me an indication of where those really dark areas will be. This will help me decide where the face starts and ends. I also put the purple down really defined areas like around the nostrils. If you look at the reference image on the left nostrils, it's quite strongly shaded. So with the fan still running, pre-wet the area on the side of the nose and then drop some purple and then push the pigment around the nose. This will set the area for these dark shadows under the nose. Using the brush with the purple mixture, I painted the eyelashes, and then I continued the brush strokes to the other side of the face where the fringe kind of falls on the side of the face. Notice how I'm holding the brush and how I pivot between working with the tip and then working with the belly of the brush. This is a good way to get a variety of width in one swipe. Make sure you blend the areas on the face. Right here I notice there's a dark area under near the wrist, so I'm putting purple there. When you're doing your initial layers with very diluted mixture, it's a good time to experiment with how you move your brush and want the hair to flow. Next, I am tackling the end of the lips where there's like dark shadow there with my fan still running. This helps the paper dry faster without using the heat gun. Putting down more purples to darker areas. You can start to see that the landscape of the face is starting to become more obvious as you build up your layers. Keep referring back to the reference image and your painting, and you'll start to notice the areas that could use a bit of purple, could use a bit more definition. Your eyes are always darting around between what you're working on and your reference image. And you will just naturally develop a rhythm. It's not something that you can pre-plan from the start. You just kind of go with the flow and let your eyes take you. To create a defined area of eyelashes, I went in with wet on dry. I made sure I capture the kind of fold under the eye. When you're painting portraits, you're looking at shapes. You don't look at a face as a face. You're looking at all the different edges and shadows and shapes. If you start looking at a face as a face, then you'll have this preconceived idea of what a lip should look like, what's an eye should look like. And that's when the portrait can become a bit wrong. Putting down a line underneath the lower lip and then blending it. I think I'm happy with the placement of purples for now. I'm going to go over another layer with the base skin tone again. This time to create more defined area under the hand there. Put the paint down and then I blend the edges. Just keep your eyes moving around the area that you're working on, and then you'll notice if you've done enough shading for this stage before you move on to the next one. For me, when I'm doing portrait, cheek area is really important, making sure the shades are there, especially if they're smiling. Just focus on getting the landscape captured when you're doing face portrait. The shadow underneath the tip of the nose is important to include in a portrait because it gives the nose more shape. Next, I'm going to tackle the cheek area. There's a dark shade towards the bottom left of the face, so I just want to make sure I put some pigment down there as placement. This will indicate to me when I'm building up my layers, this area, I'll need to pay extra attention to this area, make sure I get the value of the shade right. As I'm building up the layer on the edge of the face, I'm going to also try to capture that little soft shadow above the eyebrow. I'm starting to give this face a bit more depth and shape. Now I switch to the purple and I'm adding more definition to the dark part of the hair. I'm trying to achieve like a semi-loose style. So not trying to be precise, but I'm trying to capture the chunks of hair and how they're placed. You can alternate between the purple mixture and the skin tone up towards the hair. This is the beauty of glazing or layering in watercolor. The colors are interchangeable. Like there'll be lots of like purples and browns, not just on the face, but on the hair as well. That includes the green, of course. There'll be like some green in the face at the later stage. Just keep building up. Keep your eyes moving around. I noticed that I tend to do this kind of clockwise observation, and then I kind of work my way around the face clockwise. Just this is all subjective. As you become more familiar, you develop your own routine. because often you will paint from one side of the paper, then you keep going around, and then by the time you reach the initial section that you were working on, it's dried, and then you can like keep going. Now I want to give the eyes a bit more definition, so I'm just going in wet on dry with some brown. The fold of the eyelid, the reference photo is showing there's like a strong dark line there. But at this stage, because it's preliminary layering, you need to make sure that the lines are quite soft and blended. As long as they can indicate to you there's going to be a line there. This portrait was based on fairly abstract, fairly minimal, not abstract, but minimal pencil sketch to allow me to be more observant of the reference image. And when your sketch is more minimal, you tend to force yourself to be more, to rely a lot on your eyes and the reference image. And this can often give you like a new experience in painting in watercolor, because a lot of it will depend on your interpretation. It's scary, but it can be fun as well, because you get to see, once you're finished, oh, this looks interesting, like not highly realistic, but you've captured the gaze or the corner of the mouth really well. It's just a really interesting experiment. So creating work in watercolor often involves a lot of just going into the unknown and then see what comes out at the end. For a little while, we'll be using a mixture of the green and the base skin tone. What we want to create is kind of a coolish brown. So we're going to tackle the area in the hair and then the area around the face, but more towards the hair side of things, and also the eyebrows. I'm using the tip of the brush, holding it loosely where my fingers can pivot the angle of the brush, so I can capture thin lines that go into like the belly area of the brush. So I want to capture how the hair is placed on the portrait. If you see like a very well-defined area, the jaw section, I think it's quite clean edged. Make sure you put this dark mixture around that as a placement. This is not going to be the final look, as we are still building the layers. And let your brush kind of flow while your eyes dart between what you're doing on the paper and the reference image. Pay attention to those dark patches spread around the reference image. That's what you want to capture at this stage. Don't worry about strands or details that are quite small. We want the overall big picture. Also, when you're doing a shaded look, when you're looking at these dark areas, you can always pull the pigment along, for example, what I'm doing here, top of the fingers, because that area looks to me like it's got the same tone as the edges of the face. Now we're going to do the brows. blend as necessary. We don't want super hard edges at this point. Get a feel for the wetness, the level of wetness on your brush and the paper, and just blend, blend, blend. Now the other side of the eyebrow, tackle the dark area first. So the tip, the end of the eyebrow looks darker, so you put your pigment from there and then you kind of pull the pigment out towards the middle of the face. We're using the base skin color with medium tea consistency, and then we're going to put some tones down around the eyes to give the eyes more shape. Under the eyes there's like a dark area, you want to capture that, and the corner, the top corners of the nose, the reference image is showing quite a dramatic shift between dark and light there, so make sure you capture that. Also under the eyes, lots of blending, lots of putting pigment down and pushing it around. This area around the nostril also has quite a dramatic dark area, and don't forget the nostrils. You can start with wet on dry. You don't need to pre-wet the paper. Let the pigment sink, and then you can blend just the edges. Just slowly build up all the tones that you can see around the nose. It's always easier to do the really obvious dark areas first, and then train your eyes to start to notice the mid and the light ones. But here we're still trying to capture those punchy dark areas. Corner of the mouth, of course, yes. The reference image is showing two really obvious dark spots at the end of the mouth. So slowly build that up. Use the layering stage as an opportunity to place your pigment down that will later inform you, hey, that area, you need to pay attention because there's something defining there. When you want to create like a soft kind of tone in a larger area, just pre-wet the paper and then put a spot of pigment down and push it around. That way you have better control. Next, the last mixture you created for the hair part, the kind of brownish green, we're going to use that again, but this time we're going to pull it into the face around the hair. Blend the edge. Keep working on building your layers. Pay attention to marking, putting pigment down on those really dark areas before you tackle the less dark areas. So when you're painting a portrait, the really punchy, defining tones are not done in one go. They are all built up slowly and progressively. Pivot between using the tip of your brush and the belly and swish those pigments around. Make sure you blend. This is not a detailed style painting, but it is small because I'm painting on a journal. When you're looking at your reference image, make sure you change between zooming in to give you a better look at the details, but also zoom out. So your eyes are always constantly adjusting between working small and working big. Often when you zoom out the reference image, you will see, there's an area that I've missed that you wouldn't otherwise see if you had been so focused on zoomed in reference image. Next, we're going to add a teeny tiny bit of light blue into that greenish brownish mix that we've been using. It should look a bit in a bluish gray like this. We're going to use this mix to further create the definition on the hair. Notice how I'm just using the same brush that I initially put down on top of the head and just kind of pulling the pigment down. And I didn't load up the brush again until I feel like, yes, I will need to add more pigment. Just see how far your brush can go. Focus on capturing the lines and movement in your portrait. And then if you need to blend, you blend. When you're doing watercolor, you cannot be frazzled because that will really show in the result in your painting. Have two brushes on the go, one with pigment and one with just clean water. You can always swap between painting and blending. With the cooler tone, we want to make sure we are now looking at those areas where the warm meets the cool, and that's what your eyes should be adjusting to right now. Right now, my eyes are paying attention to the black tones in the portrait, and also the kind of mid-dark areas. So I'm using this gray to paint in the nostrils and the corner of the eyes, but also using the same color and then blending it for creating those chunks in the hair. So your eyes are always adjusting between what areas you're noticing and trying to capture those tones in your painting. Let's work on the other side of the eyes. Around the iris, put this kind of dark gray mix. And now you're giving shape to the eye and the lid. Now your portrait is starting to come together. Very exciting. As we're working with this cool tone, train your eyes to notice, to bring up those cool toned areas. The tip of the eyebrows and the corner, the top corner of the bridge of the nose. Those areas have a tinge of cool tone. Make sure you capture that. This is why in watercolor, glazing and building things gradually is the way to go. This also is a good way to not have oopsies and put down really undiluted paint and then kind of stain the paper. Now, we don't want that. Just go slow, progressively apply those hints of cool tones around your portrait. Train your eyes also to keep in mind the really white, almost light highlights in the piece, and avoid too much layering in that area. Things like the tip of the nose, you want that to remain as white, as light as possible. There's a thing in watercolor painting where painters tend to overwork a piece. That means too much layering too quickly, often, or if you fiddle with your piece frantically, that can be overworked. Then you start to lose your highlights and lowlights. Now I'm just going to pop a bit of cool tone there on top of the palm. And now we're going to change mixture. We're going to use the base skin tone again, but we're going to make it a bit cooler. You can add some greens or a bit of blue. We want it to cool down. Then we're going to build our mid-tone here. Fairly diluted. Gently and slowly swish your brush around, capture those folds and all the undulating shapes on the face, and then blending. When painting in watercolor, you actually don't need that much paint because a little paint goes a long way. It's mostly just layers and water control. And to know when to use wet on wet, wet on dry, and what stage of dryness or wetness your paper is at, I think that's the bit that takes a bit of practice. And each paper will be different. But you just have to make sure you always spend the money that you've got on getting good paper. I recommend using Coldpressed paper as you are beginning your journey, as they're very forgiving compared to hot press, and you can really be expressive with cold pressed paper. Now we're going to turn our mixture to give it a bit of warmth. So just add a few drops of the initial skin mix into the last mixture that you were using, the one that we've cooled down. Now we're going to look at the kind of mid-tones around the lips. We want this tone areas to have a bit of warmth. When you're doing kind of a line area, it doesn't have to be one continuous line. You can put a line at the start and then kind of leave a little bit of gap and then continue. That way the lines, quote unquote, will look more natural. Here I'm just wet on dry on this bit of the cheek and then blending the edge and pushing the pigment around. Notice how I shift between pigmented brush and water-loaded brush, and slowly corralling the pigment to the area I want them to go into. As you build up your layers, you're using less and less water and more pigment. In your palette, you should have the cool gray purpley mixture. I want you to drop just a bit more purple pigment into that. We're going to do wet on this section of the hair to create an interesting blooms and effect, kind of gradient look that goes from purple to the warm brown. Just blend those edges, let the pigment blend into each other. Pull those pigments out. Don't overwork it, don't touch it, let it settle, and shift your focus into the next area. Pick out that purple mixture, put it in a different well, and then add a bit of green to cool it down. Now we're going to expressively capture the movement, or placement, I should say, of the hair. We're also going to create really well-defined area around where the hair and the jaw meets the face. So don't be afraid, use your brush, trust your eyes, and follow that dark defining areas and capture that with your paint. We're going to use this cool mixture throughout the next little bit. Pre-wet the top left of the forehead and pull that pigment out. Define the shape of the hair. Pick your smaller brush and let's do some definition on the shape of the eyes. We're using this purple mix still. Use the tip of the brush, capture the shape of those lashes, not individual, but as a whole shape. Corner of the eyes, you want to put down some definition that will bring your portrait to focus. Put a dot of pigment at the corner of the mouth and then pull the pigment into the shape of the top lip. Same deal with the nostrils. Put a dot of pigment in the hole of the nostrils and then pull that along the edges of the nose. Drop of pigment here. Use your wet brush, push and blend. push and blend. Be brave for this next section. Pre-wet the cheek, like so. Swish. Watch how that pigment spread. Blend. Leave it. Drop a pigment. Blend. Leave it. Drop here, pull it down. Carefully blend just the outer edge. Again here. Gently blend just the outer edge. That divot above the lip. And under the lip. Blend. For the corner of the lower lip, put some pigment down. Use the belly to spread the pigment and then blend. Make sure you just restrain yourself to that left part of the lips, because in the reference image, those areas are quite, there's a distinct transition between the dark tone to the mid-tone. So just exercise restraint and focus on capturing the darkness of that area first. Don't spread too far. Always dab your brush on the paper towel. If it's too much water or too much paint, you can always mop up excess water or paint. Here I'm dropping the skin tone with a tiny bit of red mixture, because I want to start capturing that rosy color of the lips. Just use the base skin tone and drop a bit more red. So when you're creating mixes, take from your initial number one mix, drop it in different wells, and you adjust your mixture that way. So you always have the original skin tone mix to go back to, and use that as a base for pretty much your whole portrait. Dropping in that warm reddish mixture, adding some warmth to your painting. Train your eyes now to notice the warm tinge areas. Now your portrait has a bit more life as you're adding these rosy tones under the eyes, corners of the foreheads and the cheeks. Blend, blend, blend. Don't forget the hands. Pre-wet, drop that red, blend. Now I'm going to let those warm areas settle. I'm going to shift my focus on layering more with the dark or the greenish brownish tone around the nose, because I really want to make sure that I capture the shape of the nose right here. use your greenish brownish tone and focus on this the subtle shades of, I would say, midtones that you can see here. Next, we're going to shift back to the reddish, rosier tones. Drop some more on the lips. Blend. Corner of the eyes. Drop some red there, the reddish mix, and then pull that pigment out. Drop. Extend the pigment. Be restrained with how far you're pulling the pigment out, because when you're doing portraits, it's only just by putting these kind of warm reddish tones in certain areas is enough to bring your picture to life. You don't have to put red on every single part of your portrait. It's about hinting at the right places. I'm just going to show you the palette. This is purple here. And then I'm just going to add it to the purple that I initially used to on the hair. Well, I'm trying to make a mixture of warmish purple, if that makes sense. This is going to go on the lips. So I'm just adding a bit of the mixture of brown and red that I used on the lips. Paint the outer edge of the lip. We want to focus on laying down the pigment on the lines of the lips first before blending it. This is how we're going to build that that purple into the lips. Just drop the pigment and then use your wet brush. Pull those pigments out. Restrain yourself from pulling the pigment out all over the lips. We want to keep it at this corner right here. Always blending as you go. After I blend, I often tap the brush on the paper towel just to take away some moisture. Pull the pigment along the shape of the top lip to the corner of the mouth, and then blend that corner of the mouth into the face. This is the beauty of using Coldpressed. You can drop your pigment down and then let it do its thing, and then a few seconds later come back and reassess. Oh, I want that to go further, or I want less of that. You can always use your wet brush and tweak it. Now we're going to do a bit of blending and applying some cool gray tones on the face. Pre-wet that area on the left corner between the hair and the face. See how there's like a dramatic shift between light and dark? So we're just gonna blend that in using the gray color. This is the same mixture you used on the hair earlier. That will soften that dramatic transition. Now your eyes want to be focused on the subtle, gradual shift in the tone on your reference image. Normally around the edges of things. You'll be blending the gray from the face, the edges of the face features into the next area, like for example, the hair here. We want this layer to be quite soft and understated. Drop that gray mixture at the corner, top corner of the nose, the bridge of the nose right there. Push the pigment around and then blend. Trust your eyes. Don't be afraid to put those cool gray tones down. Keep it restrained. Your brush is not only for blending or putting down pigment. You can also use your brush to mop up excess anything or the paper towel. Drop a bit of gray above that nostrils. A bit of gray here and then dab it. That will give you a hint of the pigment without too much spreading. Some grays on the eyelashes and corner of the eyes. Start building definition into your portrait. Don't forget the line under the eye. And blend as you need. Next, I'm going to add a bit more darkness to the eyebrows. So I'm just laying down some grays into the eyebrow area. That initial mixture we used on the hair, now that it's dried, I'm just going to use my moist brush and reactivate that paint. Not diluting it. Pre-wet the edges of the hair. Now we're going to do something quite loose here. Use the loaded brush and do broad swipes. We want to define between where the face starts and where the hair starts. Make sure you blend gently the edge where the dark area of the hair meets the face. Now I want you to bring your eyes and focus on getting like an overall capture of the hair shape. Focus on those dark areas around the jawline. We want the face to clearly stand out from the shape of the hair. Notice how I'm using the tip of the brush and then pushing the brush so the pigment from the belly gets onto the paper. Now pull this dark shade gently over the edge of the hand, where the hand meets the face. Work your way around the face. And notice how the pigment beautifully spreads into the edge of the outer edge of the hair. And that's why you pre-wet those areas, because you want the pigment to do its own thing and travel. Then it will create really interesting watercolor look. We're just going to let that side settle before the next area. Same deal on the right. We're going to pre-wet the outer edge of the hair and then pick up your smaller brush, load it up with that same mixture you use on the left, and apply it to the right. Here I want you to trust your eyes and apply the paint strategically, leaving some highlighted area in the shape of the hair. Then pull your dark pigment around the face, along the edges of the fingers. Blend the areas that you need to soften. Be strategic where you put this dark saturated pigment. The highlights that you leave behind will help your portrait have more definition without the need to applying paint. Gently use the tip of your brush and drop dabs of paint along the lips, corner of the mouth, corner of the eyes, and edges of the iris. We are not using any white paint here, just being strategic with where you drop your pigment and where you leave certain areas free from too many layers. Just because the subject has green eyes, that doesn't mean you need to layer lots of greens on the eyes. You can just have hint of greens, that way you preserve the highlights. Focus on the darkest features like the eyelashes, the corners of the eyes, the pupil, the nostrils, corner of the lips, those kinds of areas. Make sure you got those sections down pat, captured in your painting. And now you can add little strands of eyebrows, just using the tip of your brush. If you don't do this part, that's fine. It will just mean that your piece will look quite loose and soft. You want a bit of edge or hardness, then you do the fine lines. But be restrained. If you overwork this, your portrait will become not so loose anymore. So just keep in mind, have a break, reassess, and see what areas you need to tweak. And there we have it. Your portrait of a face traced using the Vinci Eye app, and you painted using 12 color palette, Koh I Noor Coldpressed watercolor paper. Your palette should look something like this with all the variations of your mixtures. I hope you've enjoyed this painting process, and I look forward to seeing your adaptation and translation. Don't forget to share your work on Instagram and tag at Illustrations by Herman and hashtag Magic by Herman. Share the video with your other painting friends.